guys, Mike here from Applied Engineering and Design, and we're back with our Rhino 5.0 tutorial on setting up your interface. This is part 2. In part 1, we went ahead and went through all of the Rhino options and layouts and went over some of the interface basics. As you can see from this video, I went ahead and took some time to set up my colors, and you can go ahead and see that I now have a dark grid with some minor and lighter grid lines. I left the X and Y axis colors alone. However, as you can see right here, the legend in the bottom left, I set those colors to match so that they're easily visible. And I'll show you a quick thing here under appearance colors. This is where everything is set: your background, your major grid line, minor grid line, and here's your world axis icon colors. Those are what I set there. And lastly, I played a little bit with the general window colors to make it a little more pleasing on the eyes. But that's nor here nor there. So this tutorial, we're going to go ahead and work with our document properties here. And to get this set up, what we're going to do is go ahead and hit our new button, and we're going to pick small objects inches, which is the closest thing to what we're going to start with here. We go ahead and hit open, and that's going to be our basic template that we're going to start with, that we're going to build off of. From here, we're going to go ahead and save out our own so that hopefully we can use this to auto open in the future here. So first thing we'll do, let's go back into our tools and options. And we don't need Rhino options here because we're working with document properties. In the first one here, it shows you some summary information, and we're going to move right along to annotation. Basically, our annotation scaling gives us our scaling of the text, dimensions, and liters, and hatch scaling as well. We're not going to touch anything here. We don't need to. We're going to tick that down and go ahead and go down to dimensions. And we're going to do an entire separate tutorial on dimensioning style and dimensioning our models. So we're going to save that for later, but for right now, we're going to leave this set to the inch decimal. And as you can see, as you go down to inch decimal, you have a lot of control over what your dimensioning looks like, and that's saved in your template. So we're going to go ahead and open this back up and resave our template in a later tutorial when we talk about doing dimensioning and making that look nice. So let's skip down and we can take a quick look at hatch. Gives us an idea of picking different hatch patterns, and sort of we can set our line types as well, and we can add more line types which show up when you control your layers as well. So for right now, let's go on to our grid here. And the grid was just the colors that I changed up. So this is going to give us an idea of this grid, which I end up turning on and off pretty frequently if I want to look at my model or look at what I've been drawing, but not have the lines in the background. However, when we're drawing and editing models that we want a little bit better precision, and certainly things that we're going to be CNC machining or 3D printing, we'd like to work with grid lines that are a little tighter. So we're going to go ahead and change our grid lines to be every 100th thou instead. And you can see it updates automatically. I'll move this aside here so you can see both in the perspective and the right view that it updated right away. And our major grid lines, we're going to do major grid lines every 10, which basically gives us a layout so that every major grid line is an inch and every minor grid line is 100,000th of an inch, or 0.1 inch. And our grid line count is 200, which controls basically our grid size. So right here, our grid size is 200 minor grid lines, which gives us 20 inches left to right and top to bottom, which should be plenty of room for most designs. And this doesn't mean you are limited past that. It just means that's where your grid line is going to be. We also want to update our grid snap to make sure that it'll snap along with the minor grid lines as well. So we're going to go ahead and change that to 0.1. And let's move down to our mesh. And our render mesh quality is going to be for our rendering. And one thing we're going to change here is we're going to change it to smooth and slower, which if you have the good, decent computer that you're running your CAD on, this will make the view quality a little bit better. Jagged and faster and smooth and slower, whichever one you choose, it does not affect how the model is saved and what its properties are. This is just the display properties. I'm going to go ahead to our notes section here. In this notes section here, if we go ahead and click OK out and hit our new button, it's going to ask if we want to save. We're going to say no, and we're going to go ahead and look here. If you click on inches, these notes over here is basically what we would be entering in there. Now, as you notice, when we opened it, there were nothing in the notes, and that's due to a, if we hit cancel and come back into our tools options, the way you prevent it from showing up in your new files is you would add a / character. So we can go ahead and add some text here that describes this template. And I'm just going to put something like this template is for objects with a high precision for CNC machining or 3D printing. The units is inches. Our tolerance is 1/10. And that should be good enough for that description as well. And this / will prevent it from coming in. One cool thing you could do is you could add things in there, for instance, that you want showing up in everything. And if let's say I want applied engineering and design in here to show up in every model, which would be cool. However, I do a bunch of work for other companies, so I wouldn't want that opening up every time. So we're going to go ahead and stick that template back in there with our /. So let's move on to rendering here. And our one cool thing you want to do here is make sure you check your save support files in 3DM. That's one big change we want to do here. And that's because if you ever have to give this file off to somebody else to work on, you don't want to have to track down a bunch of different files. So this is nice. It'll make your files a little bit bigger, but hard drive space is cheap now. So you have nothing to do in safe frame as well. So under Rhino render, this is going to be where your general Rhino rendering environment will be. If we had an object in here, we went ahead and right clicked on perspective. Let's say if I hit OK here and we go ahead and let's draw a quick box object here, and we're going to set our box here and there. You can see this is wireframe. And one thing I didn't talk about in the other video is you can come ahead and right click on your title of your window here and give you the different viewport options. So you can go ahead and see shaded, and that gives you a nice shaded view. Come down and hit rendered, and that's what we're talking about right now. And so basically this is just going to show you a nice render of the box using the default lighting and everything. Ghosted sort of gives you a transparent look, and X-ray is sort of the same thing. Technical gives you dashed lines, nice for a quick technical drawing. Artistic makes it look like it's on paper, and pen is sort of the same thing, but looks like it's sketched out with a pen. So let's go back to rendered here, and we're going to go ahead and open up our tools and our options here. And this gives you an idea of your resolution, especially when you're going to go ahead and export and save off your resolution here. So if you could see that you can set it to your viewport, which is currently 774 by 418. You can set it to a bunch of different sizes or custom as well. So typically, a lot of it is going to depend on how your window is set up, but I like to increase this up a little bit. Now almost nowadays everything is done in video sizes. So down here at the bottom you have your 720p size and your 1080p size. So we're going to go ahead and set this to the 720p sized right now. We may bump that up later. And our anti-aliasing can leave that at normal. go ahead and scroll down here, and you can set your background to your environment, to a solid color, to a gradient. You can set it to wallpaper, transparent background, skylight, and you can go ahead and I'm going to leave this on environment because a lot of times you can control that from each render and everything. We don't need that to be saved into the template file, but I do like not having to reset the resolution every time. And basically, you can come down here and look at anything else you may want to update as well. Your focal blur and everything like that, which I usually don't want to set that by default. And if you ever want to get into playing with rendering and everything like that, you'll set it up for that specific document. So let's skip over to units, and this is the most important part of this template setup here. So basically, we have our model units here, which we started off with inches. And you can see we have tons of choices from microns to feet and gigameters and everything else, but we're going to stick with inches on this one. Our absolute tolerance here, because we're going to be CNC machining and we're going to be 3D printing, we want a little better a tolerance than 1/1000th here, so we're going to go ahead and set it to 1/10. The relative tolerance, we don't ever really touch that, and I haven't found any change in that makes that big of a difference. In angle tolerance, we're going to go ahead and set that to 1/2 degree instead of 1 degree. And down here in our distance display, which determines what's shown up in our command line or when we do our analyze and look for distance and everything like that. You have decimal, you have fractional, and you have feet and inches. Because we're going to be working in decimals, and like I said, we're going to be doing some machining, we want everything to stick around the same here. We're going to leave that to show 4 decimal places as well. And basically, if we tick down our units, we can come into model, which is the settings we just did, and layout. And we're going to go ahead and make sure our layout, which is where we'll be doing all our dimensioning and everything, we're going to make sure that that's the same. So we're going to set that to 1/10, 1/2 an angle, and 4 decimal places there as well. And under web browser, we're not going to be doing anything as well. So that's basically it. Now that we have that set up, I'm going to go ahead and reset our views here, delete our objects and everything. And basically, once we save this template, it's going to be saved just like that. So let's say I want this perspective view to be open, right about there. And everything else is already centered. So now we're going to go ahead and do File, Save as Template, and it opens up right to that template file folder where everything else was. So we're going to give it a name, and I'm going to go ahead and call this inch, and then we're going to add a tolerance here, so 0001. And that's really all we need for any template name. I can go ahead and hit save. And it's going to save that out. And now let's say we want to go back and do new. And we're going to hit inch. And you can see right here on the right, this template is for objects with high precision for CNC machining. That is the notes that I entered in there. And we're going to hit open. And everything is set exactly how that is. Pretty cool, huh? So that's basically it for setting up your template. And the other thing we can do that's pretty important here as well is we're going to set up our layers. So by default, our layers are set up to have 5 colored layers and a default layer. Typically, I don't use all of these layers, so we're going to go ahead and give some of them some names so that they're already pre-configured and pre-set up for what we're going to want it to do. So for instance, our default layer, I'm going to go ahead and rename it to curves. And one layer below our red layer, I'm going to go ahead and rename that to surfaces. And that way we can put all of our 3D surfaces and our poly surfaces in there. And down at the bottom, we're going to go ahead and take the white layer here and call this one lights for any rendering we're going to do. And lastly, we're going to use this green one here. We're going to call this one just ref for references. There'll be plenty of stuff we're going to drop into reference and turn on and off as we need to. So I'm going to go ahead and delete these other two. And let's save this again as the template. Save as template. Click our inch 0001. Hit save. Do you want to replace? Yes. And that's it. This is now set up for ready to go. So if we go to new and just change it back to small objects, you can see the default layers are back here and everything is restored. If we go back into new and now choose our inch 001, we hit open, you can see that all of our curves and surfaces and reference and lights are set back up. And so that gives us a good starting point for the files we're going to work with. That's about it for this tutorial. Make sure you guys subscribe for many tutorials coming up. And next up, we're going to jump right into some basics with Rhino Cam. And we're also going to be doing some basic modeling for machining parts. So stay tuned. And like I said, make sure you subscribe. And thanks for listening.